So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on our partnership between Alliance for Girls, the nation's largest girl-serving organization association, and the San Francisco Unified School District. My name is Vivier Gutierrez. I am the Director of Programs at Alliance for Girls, and today with my colleague, Nakia Dillard, Program Coordinator at Alliance for Girls, will be sharing findings from our upcoming report, Girls Leading Change, the lived experiences of girls of color in San Francisco Unified School District. We will also be engaging you all listening to this webinar either live or through a recording on a discussion of the findings, as well as getting your input on some of the recommendations that we have developed or bubbled up to the top as a result of engaging internally and externally within the district with stakeholders like yourself and girls on the best ways to translate the research into action and change. Just a little reminder before we get started, you all will be muted throughout the webinar. You won't need your camera. The webinar will be recorded and sent out within 2 weeks after today. And if you are wanting to engage with the material, you have a chat box on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Please use it to engage with some of the activities and your questions. Your questions will be addressed towards the end of the presentation, but you can input them at any time. And now, without further ado, let's get started. So here's an overview of today's agenda. We'll do a brief virtual introduction to hear who's here in the chat room. We'll do a centering activity to help us reflect on our own experiences and set us up to hearing and learning about what girls are going through as they navigate the education system. Then we'll present an overview of the initiative that we are doing in SFUSD, the Meeting Girls' Needs Initiative. We'll share with you the research and findings. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions. We'll have a short discussion about the findings and recommendations. Then we'll share some next steps, and you'll have the opportunity to not only evaluate the webinar, but support in the landscape analysis that we're putting together for this project. So in your chat box, if you could please state your name, and if you are sharing the computer with a colleague or a friend, all of your names, your organization, and one wish you have for girls of color attending schools in SFUSD. So I can introduce myself and give you an example. So my name is Livier. I am part of Alliance for Girls, and one wish I have for girls of color in SFUSD is that they feel heard and supported. I have here a few responses. So Coral from Latinas de Contra Cáncer, she wants to learn about cervical health today, and Jennifer Berger about faith. Thank you for sharing. So now I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Nakia, who will provide an overview of our centering activity.
Thank you. So now we're going to do a centering activity. And so the point of this centering activity is to give you an idea of some of the themes that arose from the research around girls' experiences. So we're going to read a series of statements that reflect those experiences. And just to get you to think about your own education and the work that you do. So if you would please type in the chat box when I read the following statements, what you have witnessed or experienced in your own schooling or work, and write a one-word reflection that sums up your feelings in response to that experience. So teachers do not like you. Adults tell students that the reason they are being mistreated is because of the clothes they are wearing. Adults tell students that their athletic capacity or ability to play sports is limited because of their gender. You know the rules of your school, but when you follow them, you are ignored or punished. Your classes include content that reflect your culture, identity, and experience. There is an adult in your school that has made a difference in your life. So again, you're typing in a one-word reaction or response to any of these prompts that relate to your personal experience in school or that you do. So we're going to give you a few moments to do that. Jennifer says she's underappreciated, something that resonates with her. Sad. Olivia. Unfair. Does anyone else have any reactions? So if anything else comes up, feel free to share it. Oh, there's another one. Pamela says distrustful. So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna turn it back over to Livia. She's gonna tell you more about who we are, and we're gonna move forward.
So for us and for you, I think it will be helpful to give you an idea of who Alliance for Girls is. Earlier I mentioned that we are an organization that's composed of members that serve girls. So this includes over 100 organizations in the Bay Area who collectively are serving over 300,000 girls and young women. Alliance for Girls provides its members with professional development opportunities, platforms and opportunities to collaborate, advocacy, engagement in advocacy, and research. The Meeting Girls Needs initiative essentially wraps all of these different components, but works in partnership with school systems, because the Meeting Girls Needs initiative, as we'll describe a little bit later, essentially is a response to our members telling us that there needed to be a collective response in supporting girls to prevent them from being arrested and detained. And the best way to do that was through partnering and working with schools to ensure that schools are safe and welcoming to girls. And the Meeting Girls Needs initiative essentially has two primary goals to achieve this. In order to make schools more welcoming and inclusive of girls, we start by amplifying girls' voices and experiences within the school system, and then working with girls and intergenerational teams on developing and enhancing solutions to address girls' needs. We do this by advancing a series of components. We start with research, and even the research phase engages young women. They help design the study. We train them to do research. They engage in the analysis and the write-up. And then we engage them and a technical assistance team in the community in an assessment of the landscape on what existing or needed supports exist for what girls shared in the research that they wanted or needed. And then collectively, we narrow down at least 2 recommendations to advance collectively, and then we evaluate and assess the outcomes and impacts of the recommendations that we put forth. This isn't to say that all of the recommendations that we collect from the landscape scan and the existing resources aren't elevated to the top. It's just that for a period of time, we focus on advancing 2 to 3 recommendations well and evaluating their outcomes and impact.
Thank you, Lydia. So this initiative couldn't have happened without a collective partnership and effort. So some of our key stakeholders were, of course, Alliance for Girls, the San Francisco Unified School District, and the girls who were a part of the research team. We also worked with the technical assistance team of Girls Champions. So this team of experts supported us in advising the work and translating the research into findings. And last but certainly not least, this couldn't have been done without the girl leaders themselves who informed and led the research. So these were some of the young women, and they were nominated by the school district as well as members of the technical assistance team. So now I'm going to Olivier to get started with talking more about the research itself.
Thanks, Nakia. So the Growth Leading Change report was designed with a mixed method approach. So we worked with Applied Survey Research, who is a consulting research firm here in the Bay Area, and we worked with the SFUSD research department to collect existing secondary data from the 2016-2017 school year. This included information about student demographics, how they are scoring on different standardized tests, and the secondary student survey, which provided information about culture and climate at school, as well as social and emotional learning measures. We also had a qualitative component, which is the youth participatory action portion of this. We trained a group of 5 young women in leading and designing research, and they executed 8 focus groups with a total of 97 middle and high school girls of color. These 8 focus groups, 4 of them were with middle schools and 3 of them were with high schools. At one high school, we had 2 focus groups because we did a focus group with the Black African American girls and the English language learner girls. This approach allowed us to have both the numbers and the performance measures to understand from a bird's eye view what girls were experiencing in schools, but the focus groups really helped us understand what the story behind the numbers and what things look like for girls on a day-to-day. So with these 2 pieces, we started to see a story. We learned that collectively, girls of color comprise the majority of girls at SFUSD. So 9 in 10 girls attending schools in SFUSD are girls of color, which may appear to be the majority. However, when you look at racial and ethnic data, you start seeing how girls of color are also a minority. So 3 in 10 girls are Latina, 1 in 10 are Black or African American, and I think it's important to note here that this is data from 2016 and 2017, and the number of Black and African American girls has dropped. We have yet to get the updated statistics in that, but we've heard that from the school district, and we've even seen that play out in our girl leadership team, sadly. Girls of color are also lost under umbrella terms. So for the API population, the data that we looked at was before the district passed the resolution to disaggregate the data, but we know that the API population has a series of languages that they're speaking, including Cantonese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. And in our focus groups, we knew that Latina, that term, that umbrella term, encompasses different backgrounds and experiences. So in the focus groups, we had girls from different countries, from Mexico and Latin America, and we had girls that spoke Spanish or didn't speak Spanish but spoke their indigenous language. And this concept of the majority and the minority is summarized by one girl and her day-to-day experience at school. She said, "What I kind of like about this school is that it's diverse. But like the other girls in the focus group said, if you take a class, it will be full of one race, and then there'll be like one Black person there." So this really embodies the numbers and how they're felt on a day-to-day basis. Girls are walking into schools that are very diverse, but when they step into the classroom, they may be the only girl that looks like them or has similar experiences like them. So in our quantitative data analysis, we looked at girls collectively, regardless of race, and we started to see that girls of color are graduating at high rates. 87% of girls in the 2016-2017 school year graduated. Girls are outperforming boys in English and math. According to the Smart Balance Assessment Consortium test, 63% of middle and high school girls are performing on track in English language arts and literacy, compared to 52% of boys. 52% of middle and high school girls and 47% of boys are on track in math. And these findings were statistically significant. However, collectively, regardless of race or ethnicity, girls are experiencing some challenges. For girls, rates of absenteeism rise between middle and high school across all racial and ethnic categories. And when it comes to social and emotional learning measures, girls scored the lowest in self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the belief in one's ability to succeed and achieve an outcome. And what's interesting is that while girls scored the lowest in self-efficacy, they were scoring the highest in self-management, so managing themselves. And I think this really tells you a lot about their experience, as you'll learn further how this is embodied by external forces. But essentially, girls are doing well in math and English. Girls are outperforming boys, and they're managing themselves, but they still have a challenge in believing their own ability to succeed and achieve an outcome at school. When we broke down the data and disaggregated by race and ethnicity, that's when we started to see major differences in outcomes, as well as how girls were experiencing school. The infographics here summarize some of the findings among our Black, African American, and Latina girls. Black girls were found to have the lowest graduation rate. Black girls were also found to have the highest rates of absenteeism compared to all girls. Latina girls made up the largest population of English language learners. And one thing that we learned that requires further research is that 75% of English language learner girls are graduating are not graduating compared to 87% of all girls. So there's still some questions as to the reasons and factors behind that. And it doesn't compare to what Black girls' graduation rate, but that was definitely a question that came out that is important to point out. And Latina scored the lowest in English language standard test compared to other girls. Both Black and Latina girls are disproportionately represented in special education, and a large portion of students in foster care are Black and Latina girls. And this chart here that you see in front of you presents data on girls' scores for their social and emotional learning and their cultural climate. I'm only going to point out a few things, but if you want to read it, the blue is that girls in that category, whether it's social emotional learning or culture and climate, scored above average. Yellow is that they scored average, or red is below average. So if you look at social emotional learning scores, foster youth girls, which are primarily composed of Latina and African American girls, as I mentioned earlier, are scoring the lowest in SEL measures of growth mindset, self-efficacy, self-management, and social awareness, with Latinas collectively scoring the lowest across all these measures. However, if you look at the Black or African American girls, they're scoring at the average result for growth mindset and self-efficacy, but the lowest for self-management and social awareness. And then white girls, which is the blue box on the far right, are scoring above average on all of those measures. In terms of culture and climate scores, which are measured by a climate of support for academic learning, knowledge and fairness of discipline, feelings of safety and sense of belonging, Black and African American girls scored the lowest in all of those measures. So that's the story and the kind of picture that the numbers were telling us. And when we started the focus groups and hearing from girls, we began to see and get a peek into why these numbers may be what they are. And what we heard from the girls was that a few things impacted their daily life and experiences at school. Racial tension, which was perpetuated by teacher bias, sexual harassment, and conflicting messages and expectations, as well as their own resilience and resistance to some of these external factors impacting their day-to-day lives. When it came to racial tensions, girls talked about being aware of how their identity impacted their school experience, but also that the racial tension that they were walking into predated and pre-existed their entrance to the school because they could see it and feel it the moment they walk in. They didn't see their culture or identity reflected in school events or in the curriculum. When they walked in, they saw segregation among their peers, racial differences in how the teachers look like and how the student body looked like. And they said that all of this was perpetuated by bias among teachers and stereotypes between their peers and imposed on them by teachers. So in one girl summarized it by saying, basically, the people of color don't get treated the same way as white people do. Another girl shared how this experience went across all races and ethnicities, which was a unique finding for us because when we did the same project in a different school district, there was a collective acknowledgement that Black and African American girls were experiencing the worst of it, not only teachers, but also their peers. But in San Francisco, girls said that they each and all were experiencing it collectively. That's not to say that Black or African American girls did not have it better or worse, but there was just a shared sense of having challenges. So one girl shared, she was from our English language learner focus group, her struggles at school. New students come to this country, they may not speak the language as well, and they may not be treated as well. They're not respected by students. Students should have more understanding that learning a language is hard. Not just white people that pick on them. Black people could be anyone. So I'll hand it to Nakia to go into teacher bias.
Thank you. So one of the issues that Girls Express experienced was teacher bias. So girls expressed that they were just feeling unsupported by their teachers, that their teachers had low expectations of them, and that their bodies were being policed differently from boys. They also expressed an overall feeling that their voices weren't being heard and that their voices were undervalued. So in one case, a girl expressed that she was told by her PE teacher, boys have a better lung capacity than girls. In another case, a young woman with high hopes to advance her education really wanted to join an AP course, so she took all the necessary actions that were required to earn her place in that class. And when she finally got there, her teacher says to her, "Oh, are you sure you want to do this class?" And she said, "Of course I am. That's why I transferred here." But I didn't hear that teachers were asking the same of other races. So even when girls are trying to achieve their educational desires, they are still met with these low expectations, which is an issue. So girls also of all grade levels expressed that they reported engaging in dialogue around sexual assault and sexual harassment. And so one key thing I wanted to lift up is that they expressed that they knew their sexual harassment policy, that they were being educated about that in the school district, but they still were experiencing sexual harassment, but some of them were not reporting it because they just didn't feel comfortable. And some of the issues that they were experiencing were like catcalling, inappropriate touching, harassment on social media. So girls didn't want to report sexual harassment because one of the main issues was like being afraid of being bullied on social media. And so here's a quote from one of the girls: "Social media can lead to sexual harassment or bullying." So maybe they post pictures that's uncomfortable on Facebook and it spreads really fast. So often that could mean that within an hour, something can be posted on social media after an incident has occurred. And so it's really causing girls to just not feel comfortable with reporting it due to the backlash. Another reason why they don't feel comfortable is because teachers are blaming them for being harassed. So one girl was told that she should change how she presented herself to avoid an incident she had with sexual harassment. So, yeah. Girls also experiencing conflicting messages in school, and some of them were, well, for Black girls in particular, they expressed that they were expected to be ratchet, to be loud, to be doing bad in school, but when they would perform well and contradict those stereotypes, then they'd be told that they were whitewashed. So really, how can they win? It's this conflicting messages that they get on both ends. Another conflicting message that girls expressed was being expected to uphold certain beauty standards. For example, being expected to look like an Instagram model with a certain body type, with nice clothes, but if they don't look like that Instagram model, then they get bullied and teased for not having those beauty standards. Also, when they do dress like the Instagram model or dress nice or uphold those beauty standards, they are then blamed for what they wear. So again, it's conflicting. Girls are also being objectified and sexualized and being shamed for their sexuality. So some girls reported, "We get smacked in the butt and people think it's okay." Boys are saying sexual comments like, "Oh, I would do this to her." You get slut shamed way more than dudes ever will, even if they do more than you do. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Livier, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the resilience of girls.
I think one of my favorite parts of doing this work is hearing about how girls are resisting and challenging their surroundings and what they say they want and need. So in our focus groups, girls talked about a lot of things, but they talked about how role models, social movement, and courses that reflected their background and identity were important, like Miss Jordan's African American Heritage course. So girls said that role models help them understand and contextualize their experience. So one girl said, my role models help me to understand my self-worth, to understand the tough times, temptations, and drama, and to understand that we can do anything we put our minds to. So this young woman, and a lot of the young women, shared that when they got to high school, they started to see and realize with the support of adults that all of the challenges and things that they were experiencing in the school were not because of them. It was not their fault. It was part of a larger structural issue that was impacting them. So for them to get this, role models were an important key part of understanding their experience. Girls also talked about wanting courses like gender studies courses or ethnic studies courses with a gender lens that really elevated powerful women throughout history and that elevated their experience. Girls that attended focus groups at Mission High School and girls that were researchers and leaders from Mission High School all collectively agreed that an example, a very solid example of something that's already happening, is the African American Female Heritage course offered by Mission High School. They said that based on what they heard or based on their experience, they really wish that other girls in other schools in SFUSD could experience this course or courses that had gender lens to them, because they felt like it made a major impact not only in their academic experience, but how they engage with their peers also. One thing that was really interesting was the role of social movements for young women. So one girl said, I was tired of being put down because of who I am and what I look like. But yesterday at the March for Our Lives protest and today in the peer-led focus group, I experienced what it truly feels like to be confident because of who you're going to be. So something that was interesting, possibly because of the context of the period that we were doing focus groups, which was between February and March, was that girls reference activism and social movements as a source of power and strength, but also as a way to challenge the existing systems that they saw impacting their lives. So in here we hear about March for Our Lives, but they also reference the Me Too movement, and what was also very empowering both for the girls that participated in the focus groups, but the girls that led the focus groups, was having a space where girls were collectively sharing and leading the definition and informing changes for their experiences at school. So to review some of our findings, and we're posting this because it'll help us with a later section that we have for discussion. Girls shared that racial tension, teacher bias, gendered expectations, sexual harassment, and their resilience and knowledge informs and impacts their day-to-day experiences. Do you all have any questions about the research, the Meeting Girls Needs Initiative, and the partnership with SFUSD between Alliance for Girls and SFUSD? If so, please enter your questions into the chat box, and we will start answering them for you. So we're getting a lot of no questions, which is good. We have been doing the listening sessions and sharing this information for a few months now. We just started sharing the research and findings with the external community. And one question that we get a lot has to do with the experiences of the young women researchers. So we've led this project a few times already with YPAR. And for the young women researchers in SFUSD, I think that it's important to note here for contextualization, language was interesting. So when we say girls, they chose that language even though it may not, some might think that doesn't encompass the experience. They define themselves as researchers and they trained in research methods for over a month. They engaged in data collection for another month and a half, and then for a period of 2 months, supported with the analysis and write-up. And then for the last few months, they've been helping translate some of the findings into recommendations, which we'll transition to in now, so that we can hear your feedback. So you can post this in the chat box now, or you can also fill out an evaluation form that's also a worksheet. But we created this call to action that you can click on the upper part of your screen. Or, like I said, you can also include it in the chat box. Can you tell us, please, something that you're currently doing that is addressing the key findings? Some recommendations that you have that you think we should consider and include in our work? So as a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, we will be collecting this information and incorporating it into a landscape scan. So although Alliance for Girls will, for now, be moving forward with 2 recommendations or 3 recommendations, we do present the overall recommendations to the district, as well as we also like to elevate any work that is existing within schools or outside of schools in community that are addressing the expressed needs that girls noted in the report. And if you didn't have an opportunity to engage, we'll also have the evaluation posted at the end. Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer says that training to improve self-efficacy through creating social movements and actions, one recommendation, and then questioning social media and other forms of media, as well as doing girl-led projects to improve their self-efficacy. Jennifer, thank you for giving that. That's a great transition into the 2 recommendations that we have. I think one of the recommendations you are bringing up and elevating is a social media training. So we've been presenting this research to staff and leadership at the district and schools, girls and community partners and members. And I'll start with the second recommendation just because Jennifer brought that up earlier. But one thing that are collectively bubbled to the top from everyone was a need for a social media training to deconstruct existing media, since it plays such an important part in harassment and bullying of girls, the fear of reporting cases of sexual harassment, as well as creating a culture at school that just perpetuates certain stereotypes and views of women and girls, as the girls quote earlier noted. So one of the recommendations that our girl leaders and our technical assistance team have really narrowed down to is a social media training that incorporates some advocacy and action around leveraging the quickness of this dissemination of information. As Nakia said earlier, information can travel, bad information about a girl can travel within an hour to the larger her peers. So using that to disseminate information about your rights if you are experiencing sexual harassment or assault, on how to report, and if you choose not to report but you still want to access support, how to do that. So that was one recommendation. The second recommendation that arose had to do with training security aides and security officers. So in the report, as well as discussed a little bit, part of the culture and climate that girls are experiencing in school, they felt that it was adults not responding to their experiences and needs, and in particular officers not understanding them and not feeling like they treated them equally to other students. So girls shared that they would like a training for security officers or T10 security aides, where they can learn about the experiences of girls of color and what they go through on a daily basis, and provide them with some skills on how they can support girls and make school a safer and healthier environment for them. So those are two recommendations that have consistently come to the top. So again, I'm gonna plug this call to action. So if you're listening live or if you are hearing a recording of this, please click on the button at the top to provide input and responses of your own recommendations, as well as to respond to these two recommendations that have come up. Okay, so I'm going to post the link in the chat box also. Oh, Nakia posted it, I posted it. So if you click on that link, if you were unable to do the call to action, you should be able to access it. And if not, give us a second and we'll make sure that you can access it and make it public. So I'm going to post the link again. It should work this time. And I'll add the call to action again. So could you, okay, so could you tell us if it's worked? Okay, great, that worked. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So please take a few minutes to complete that survey. It shouldn't take more than 3 minutes. And as you're doing that, I'll provide an overview of what our next steps are. So we have another community report back session coming up on Wednesday, March 6th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. at Mission High School, which is located at 3750 18th Street in San Francisco. So we'll be going over the same information. However, it'll be at the school setting and it'll be in person, and you'll be able to engage in person with other attendees. So if you're interested in meeting some people face to face, if you have additional thoughts and want to circle back to us, please attend that workshop. Or if you feel like this is something you would really like a colleague or a friend to attend, please let them know that that is also coming up. And as I shared earlier, we are refining the recommendations we presented to you and moving them forward within the district in the next couple of months. Okay, so it seems like we're still having some challenges with the evaluation form. So what we'll do is we will send you all a follow-up survey at the end of the webinar. We'll try to fix it right now, but if we still continue to have issues, we'll follow up with the recording and then the final link for action. So if you have any questions, here's my contact information as well as Nikia's contact information. For you, Nikia will be, Nikia's new to the team, and she is leading the implementation of this work alongside me. Yes, Jennifer. So that link that you sent us is the final link. Thank you. So please click that link to fill out the evaluation form. And with that,